Larry Forbes from ARC Advisory Group. This session is a update on the Open Process Automation Forum. So ARC is very happy to facilitate this session, but the content of this session has been developed by the Open Process Automation Forum for their objectives of informing the industry and the press and the public about what's been going on. And it's been a while since we've been person to person, so that's a pleasure. Now I'm going to leave the podium and leave it to the Open Process Automation Forum. First, I'll introduce the co-chair of the forum, Don Bartusiak. Here's your clicker.
Okay, good morning, everybody. And listen, I want to thank the ARC for giving us this opportunity. They've been very generous with session time to us over the years, and even getting a Wednesday slot now where we can get more of the ARC forum attendees. We're really grateful. So what we're not going to do this year, this is not going to be a deep dive into the standard. What we want to paint is a holistic picture of the Open Process Automation Initiative as embodied by the OPA Forum of the Open Group. So we're going to give you an update of the standard, and we're going to talk about business ecosystem building, conformance certification status, and included in business ecosystem building is we're working on a document that we call the OPAS Adoption Guide, okay? And we have high hopes that that's going to address a lot of people's questions on how this marketplace is going to play out. So this is a team effort. I want to give a shout out to Mohan Kalyaranaman from ExxonMobil, who really pulled this whole session together. And it's now my pleasure to pass the baton off to Kirk Smith, our TWG, Technical Working Group Co-Chair, who's the first speaker in the program.
Thanks, Don. I'm from Intel Corporation. I work in software-defined autonomous systems at Intel, and I'm excited to be here today. Really what you got to look at the visionaries that we've got that have been working in the Open Process Automation Forum for the last 6-7 years or more since it's been around, right? We should all give them an applause for sticking with it, right? For the time and hanging in there. Look, it's hard to drive transformations of this scale, right? Especially when you get down into the details and you're talking about interoperability and portability of workloads in proprietary systems and how should those interfaces work, right? So just the tenacity of this group and the subcommittee leads and the chairs and co-chairs of all the people participating and all the members has just been fantastic. So really have a lot of momentum that we're excited about that's happening today. So just kudos to everybody, right? And I'm seeing many of these people just for the first time in 2 years, having been on a Teams video, right? Talking for the last 2 years, right? Many of you in the audience as well. So very, 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 very good to see you in person. You folks know probably a lot about the Open Process Automation Forum already to some degree, but it's an industry organization. We have over 100 members. We're a standards of standards body. We're not going to create a standard unless we have to, right? So if there's something that makes sense to adopt to get to the interoperability of workloads that we're after, the portability we're after from a configuration standpoint or an application standpoint, that's what we're going to do. The organization of the Open Process Automation Forum is made up of 4 working groups. The business working group, you heard Don speak about the business guide. They're focused on marketing and outreach. The liaisons work with all of the other standards organizations we have to that we work with is important to have in place. The enterprise architecture working group, the use cases from the end users, the requirements, the feedback from the OEMs, feedback from the SIs and ISVs in the room. All those companies together in one place having that discussion is really what that group's about. And so systematically defining how to do that, right? I used to Google, open distributed control systems 5, 6, 7 years ago. I used to tell John Vicente this as well, but and nothing would come up, right? You wouldn't see anything 6, 7 years ago. And now when you start doing it, it's a flood of information is there today. So this transformation is really happening. The technology working group, is really focused on, making the sausage, so to speak, of the standards work, covering the architecture, covering the information modeling and standards configurations for function blocks and 1131 and 1499, et cetera. The applications framework, that we are excited about bringing that out from an application portability in one of our upcoming versions. The connectivity framework built around OPC UA, the security architecture, built around IEC 62443, the systems and network management where DMTF and the Redfish standard, right, is really emerging to bring compute, networking, and storage together from an interface perspective. The physical platform work, if you were here yesterday evening, you saw the demonstrations we have from folks bringing prototypes to bear in the market that we think will scale in the industry. We focus on interoperability workshops, and you heard it in the executive session today. You heard them mention OPAF. You heard them mention orchestration, right? There he is, waving his hand. And so orchestration is key to this, right? People talk about static orchestration, dynamic orchestration. People talk about the edge cloud and whatever that means to them, right? But the real thing is getting down into those embedded networks where you can really move that workload over the life cycle, right, of a product in an end user's ecosystem is really critical. So we're excited about the work that we're doing based on the Tosca framework there, and you'll hear more about that in the future. So how many folks have seen the Top Gun movie? Come on, only 3 people, 150 something million the first time out. Right, so I may go see it again, but anyway, OPAF feels the need for speed, and I'll just say it, right, because I've heard the end users say it, and that's what we should be doing. But getting to something that's interoperable and something that's configurable and portable at the same time, all the way down to the binaries is not easy to do. And so we've made significant progress in the last several years. And we're at a point now where I think you're going to start seeing products emerge, as you've already heard about, right, with some of the announcements that have been made. So the spec, has 7 parts today. And as we move forward, right, we want to be able to release features, right, at a pace, as much as we can to catch up with the exponential change that we're seeing in the market. So that's really what we're trying to do. So we're changing our internal process to move faster. And we expect, you'll see features like application portability, orchestration, and physical platform elements come out individually that won't require the entire spec to be released. That's our goal, right? And in places where we do have to modify it, we'll modify everything to reference it. But hopefully it increases our cadence, how fast we can turn the wheel from a standardization standpoint. So as I mentioned, there's 7 parts of the standard. Looking back at the Open Process Automation Forum, the original theme in 2019 for the first version was interoperability, built around OPC UA, right? Configuration portability was introduced in 2020. And then the control functionality for the OPAS function blocks, the 1131 function blocks that you're seeing come out, and then the 1499 are being introduced last year and this year. Application portability and orchestration is coming out in the next year or 2. Really, look, this is focused on that heterogeneous multi-vendor ecosystem that we know is a reality, right? I grew up programming a control system in the 90s that was very proprietary, and it's absolutely clear that all the way down to the distributed control system level, we have to be able to be fully open and orchestrate at an interface level. And I think this is the last slide for the next speaker, but version 2.1, like we said, is going to enable making product. And that's what we believe version 2.1 begins to trigger. You'll hear Ed A. just talk about the OPAF certification program and how that's developing. You'll hear Luis and others talking about the ecosystem, right, and how that develops. You've heard ExxonMobil and other test bed end users talk about their test beds that they have in progress today. And that's all coming to fruition to bring products to the market.
Right, so good morning, everybody. My name is Luis Duran. I work with ABB. I'm Global Product Client Manager in the process automation space. But today I'm speaking to you from the Open Process Automation Forum, and I'm the co-chair for the Business Working Group. So it's not only about writing to standard if you want to transform the marketplace and the ecosystem in the marketplace, and it takes many moving parts. What we envision in the forum is that rather than a, let's say, monolithic one-to-one relationship between end users and an automation supplier, we'll see the transformation of these automation suppliers breaking up into several roles that includes solution suppliers, software and hardware suppliers, system integrators, service providers. And it's not to mean that a company cannot fulfill different roles for an end user in a given point in time, but we anticipate that there is a transformation happening that is motivated by the standard and by the request of the end user to transform. I think that Mike Carroll was very clear this morning. We better do it because anything else is unacceptable. I think I'm quoting you correctly. So this is where if we want to transform this ecosystem, we want to start at the top level. And, again, we heard clearly this morning, I'm going to quote here Alex Johnson, who works also from Schneider Electric, who works in the forum, that's been saying, end users, it's very easy to start just ask your suppliers on what are we doing with regards to the Open Process Automation Forum and the adoption of the OPAF standard. So it started there. But it doesn't end there. There's a lot more to do. And what we have done in order to transform and motivate the ecosystem is to work for each of these roles, starting with the end user, to collect their narratives. What is the transformation? What is it that they're trying to get out of this, the adoption of this standard? What are the use cases? How are they going to do this? And all of those things drive requirements. The business working group and the enterprise architecture working group have been collaborating to populate and expand on the set of requirements that have been early defined for the forum, and to enhance the context of each of these situations. And that is the motivation, the engine driving the OPAF standard. So I think I want to emphasize this because this diversity that we have within the forum, where we have multiple roles, multiple type of companies represented in the forum and collaborating, where we have, the companies that you saw in the earlier slide, all discussing, engaging into creative, constructive dialogue to build that's what shows in the standard. So that's a key for us. What are we doing to amplify and to expand on the voice of the users? Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. Example number one, last year in July, we decided to do for the forum membership what we call an end user caucus. Essentially, we took 3 topics that were of interest for the future of the OPAF standard, and we discussed those subjects in detail. Basically, we created a series of workshops in which we went into details in each of the topics. We collected the topics for the physical platform, the application portability, and system orchestration. We took each of those and we discussed what is the motivation for the end users to adopt, to change the way the status quo, how things are done, and adopt these principles. We had a great participation. We had over 170 participants from 54 companies. I'm not going to talk about the numbers, but the quality of the participation and the engagements, especially representative, as you can see here on the slide, the end user community. What we did, we captured relevant requirements, user stories, and use cases. This is an ongoing process. We want to continue this exercise. What is key here, you have to speak up, talking to the end users. I want to hear every role in the ecosystem, but we want to hear the end users first. Why? I think someone said yesterday in the OPAF session yesterday afternoon, the end user motivates this with their wallets, right? The capital investment, why you want to do things, why you perceive that it's going to be value created, doing these type of activities. That's what we're trying to capture with this type of exercise. I'm going to skip this. Don mentioned the adoption guide. This is a work in progress. We plan to have our first, let's say, draft of this document later in the month, and start to present it in different venues. What is the goal? We know that for end users and system integrators, there is a degree of transformation in the way that they're doing things. The industry has been working in a certain way for several years. Now things are changing. So we want to provide certain guidance, number one, to illustrate what type of changes are to be expected when you start to adopt the OPAF standard, how these changes are affecting the system lifecycle, or even how the system is used over time. We want to take a view from each of the roles in the ecosystem, starting with the end user, but then moving on to the system integrator, the supplier, etc. And we want to take lessons learned from other activities that were performed during the technology working group work, like a paper exercise, or even which wasn't basically a paper activity to review how to implement a system using the OPAF standard. There's a lot of lessons learned from that's being used across the forum right now. And obviously also the interoperability workshops that Paul Hunker is going to be talking about later. What we want to deliver is a series of FAQs. We want to make this really simple. You have a question, you look into a potential answer. If the question is not there, you can let us know, hey, I would like to know this, so we can expand the document over time and improve it. As I say, we want to have a first draft soon. This is something that we want to release before the end of next year. When we talk about the life cycle, we're discussing this from the aspect of the adoption of the OPAF standard. So from the awareness, what is the OPAF standard? How I care, why do I care about the OPAF standard? Going through the qualification process to select suppliers, system integrators, and moving on all the way to the operations and maintenance, and later on the enhancements. So a lot more to come here. Not going to go into the details right now, but that's kind of the current work that we have. Why we're doing this? Because, as I said before, I'm going to stress that again, we want to amplify the voice of the ecosystem roles. We want to amplify the end user voice. And with that, I think that we have, one important thing. So what type of question we're discussing in the adoption guide, I think, is just to give you a glimpse of what it is. So, you can read the questions here, but this is just example questions. We have about, 50, 60 more questions on the same vein to address, as I say, different aspects of the adoption, awareness, qualification, implementation of the standard. So with that, I think now, yes, it's time for us to move into the other topic. And, you can see these in the material once it's published, but just want to emphasize, we're working on the standard, we're working on several aspects, several documents, but we're not stopping here. We have more things to come in addition to the work we're doing with the standard.
Good day all, and happy to be here myself. It's been about 2.5 years since I've seen some of the familiar faces from a while back. My name is Ed Aegis. I'm with Intel. I'm a Senior Director for Compliance and Strategic Initiatives with respect to standards. I'm going to cover at a very high level today, and of course, if you want to get into more details, I'll be available after the panel also. I want to talk about the Wave 1 certification, the progress that we've made over the last 2.5 years, and then speak a little bit briefly about the labs that we have been collaborating with respect to the standards, and then where are we headed after that in terms of Wave 2 certification and the concept of certification releases. So today, our current plans are to introduce what we call Wave 1, which consists of profiles. In OPAF, we actually certify the profiles. And we have taken the effort here to actually break this up into what we call two releases. You heard from my colleague Paul yesterday when we was talking about OPC-UA, since we're closely collaborating, and that is one of the functional requirements that we want to introduce for certification. And that's covered here, as you can see, by the profile OCF 001. And then you see what we call the systems management aspect, which is the redfish portion. And then the DCP, which is basically more for the physical platform. And then there are things that we call facets. In all instances, when it comes to certification testing for Wave 1, there is a requirement, as you can see noted on there, in regards to the security facet. It is our plans right now. We're very focused with all the work that we've done to introduce certification for Wave, what we call 1A, right around the end of the third quarter or early fourth quarter. And then that'll be followed in the fourth quarter with respect to the completion of the, as you can see, the pub sub. And Paul talked about this yesterday during their update on OPC-UA. So we're closely aligned in terms of that process and trying to address functional requirements, the needs that have been expressed by the members, the suppliers, and the end users within OPAF. Obviously, any certification program that you have without some facility to be able to test the product that would not be complete. And so, because, as Kirk mentioned earlier, we are the standard of standards, okay, we have been working in collaboration with some other organizations that fulfill the need to provide the testing services that we would need. And as you can see here, with respect to the part 2 of the security aspect, and also part 4, the OPC, we're utilizing existing certification programs where a member would provide a certificate after they've completed that certification testing as evidence of having met the requirements that we need to meet in order to say that I'm fully certified in compliance with the requirements that we would call out either Wave 1A or Wave 1B. And then, of course, on redfish, a very exciting area here in terms of systems management, we are working with ERDI. This is an organization that has been developing a test tool, and we're in the process of actually validating and verifying the test cases along with the test tool that we'll be using as part of that certification effort. So I would say stay tuned. There'll be more information on that as we move along in the process. And then finally, I want to talk about, very briefly, giving you a summary of where we're at, because we need to stay proactive as we see the requirements that are coming about and functional needs that the end users have identified that we need to be able to support from a certification testing effort, as well as where the members are at in regards to the specifications that Kirk touched on earlier. So there's quite a bit of information, quite a bit of requirements that are called out in the OPAS 2.1 specification. And so what you see here outlined is, to give you an idea, is you see Wave 1A and Wave 1B. Those are the first two that we'll be focusing on towards the end of the year here. And then when we get into Wave 2, we start adding some additional functionality, additional depth and breadth of testing as part of the certification program. And that will roll out further out in time as we complete not just the spec, but then we've got to also do test plans and test scripts and get them integrated into a test tool. So we're very, very, as I would like to leave you with, forward-looking in this effort, okay? As you can see, so there's a number of waves that we will do as far as releases, and then as that comes about, we'll certainly be making announcements on that. I'm going to hand off now to Paul, who's going to talk about interoperability and our plans moving forward. Thank you.
I'm a consultant. I work for Yokogawa primarily, but also for the OPC Foundation. For the foundation, I'm director of certification, so thus I work with that a lot on the certification pieces. Let's talk a little bit about IOPs. So what is an IOP? It's when we get together and test things, right? Usually they're physical activities, so you get all the hardware together in a lab. With COVID, that hasn't happened recently. So we've set up a virtual IOP environment so we can actually test things remotely. It's not quite as good, but it works, and it lets us at least verify what we're doing. When did we have one? We've had a couple, actually. We had the first one back in June of 2019, and we were mostly working on the interoperability and the initial pieces. And then in January, we had a virtual IOP of the 2.1 items, and that was actually quite successful. We had a group of 14 organizations that joined. We verified a fair chunk of the specifications. We had some issues because it was virtual, but it still went over fairly well. We found some issues in people's products, and that's to be expected. That's normal for an IOP. People are trying things and they find problems with their products. We also found some minor spec issues, which was the more important part. We want to validate the specifications and make sure that what we've got in the spec is correct. One of the big feedbacks from it was we realized we needed more IOPs, and we didn't need them 2 years apart only. So what we've done is we've scheduled some focused IOPs since then. So they're testing very short one topic subjects. When we see something that we need more exercise with, we've created effectively a 4-hour, 5-hour IOP where we get all the vendors together for an afternoon. It's virtual, and we test the particular topic. We had one on signal processing recently. That actually worked very well. 6 vendors. It was fairly exhaustive testing, and it worked really well. We're going to have some more in the coming weeks. We have one scheduled for security at some point here where we want to run through all the security pieces. System management's also on the table. That's probably a little further out. We know we want to get back to having an actual physical IOP. We're still trying to figure out the plans on how to do that, mostly because we have to figure out where we can have one. And with the COVID restrictions, it makes it a little difficult because you got to get everybody in the same room and actually you let them go test stuff. But we're trying to set it up. And the next physical IOP may actually be one where we show it to people afterwards too, because the equipment's come along far enough that we'll test for a few days and then allow it to be open to other companies, other people to come look at it. So we got to figure out the venue and how we do that. But we're working on that too. So this is a very quick update. I'm around and you can ask questions. I help the group also with OPC-UA issues if you guys haven't figured that out too.
Morning, everyone. I'm Mohan Kalyanraman. I work for ExxonMobil. Finally glad to see everyone face to face after 2.5 years. So one of the things that we have been doing I'm part of the business working group for the Open Process Automation Forum, and I co-chair the marketing and outreach for the forum. So one of the things that we have been doing from 2020 onwards is we've kind of pivoted to the virtual model, right? So we've had webinars, we've had virtual engagements, even virtual workshops, and I think that has been it served a purpose, but it's still good to start to move to the physical type events. So let me give you a quick flavor of where we have been. I think in 2021 we had maybe 15 plus engagements. We started to have some face-to-face interaction as well. So I think we're starting to work more, trying to get the message right about what open process automation is, and open process automation, as a foundation for digital transformation efforts, for the IT/OT efforts, free access to data. So those are the kind of themes that we are trying to get across. And really, from a marketing and outreach perspective, what we set out for ourselves are goals, which essentially say, look, we want to prepare the marketplace for adoption, right? We want to communicate to the industry and parallel groups. We want to be able to create a pull in the marketplace. So I think this is done primarily by looking at end users, encouraging prototyping, and then highlighting the type of efforts that go on in the prototyping, and really giving a flavor for what it is that we are doing as end users that, again, drives the demand for the products, conformant products to be available for testing. And one of the other important activities that we do is really to work with our partner groups. And I think we heard from other users as well about the parallel activities going on. So, whether it's NAMOR or WIB, end user groups, IOGP, these are all groups where end users are. And I think we are trying to make sure that we establish the connections and then use that collective way to move this activity forward. Okay? The other activity that we set for ourselves was really to work on increasing our outreach, getting new members in, and even from different geographies, right? So Asia Pacific, again, a growth region. So we want to have an emphasis on this. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the activities. And also, as we start to look at how we roll this out, we want to make sure that we include EPCs, because as an end user, we go to EPCs and say, here's a project, run this and get this for us. And we need to get those people into the room and into our forum, okay? So with respect to market adoption, I think in October of 2020, we actually had a adoption workshop, which was run virtually. But I'm excited that we're going to have one tomorrow and in Crystal D Ballroom. So please be there, 7:15 onwards. We'll start the workshop at 7:30. But be there. I think we'll give you a good flavor of how end users are thinking about it. I think you saw what Jacques mentioned about brownfield versus greenfield cases. You saw what ExxonMobil was talking about in terms of its field trial. So I think you will get a flavor for this as we talk about the adoption scenarios. Okay. We have engagements with conferences now, that exhibitions and conferences. So we plan to be at the Hanover Messe USA later on in Chicago, Akima. So places where we can then show what the progress we have made and talk about it. And in terms of creating pull, so we've got further activities, apart from this ARC. Now we've got activities in ARC Asia. We're going to be talking about end user perspectives over there. And we also have webinars, targeted webinars in August. And we talked about the global reach, right? I think we're going to be at different venues throughout the year. And we also have this year a big focus on trying to create awareness in China in terms of open process automation, okay? So in terms of ecosystem development, we have the CSIA, Control System Integrator Conference, coming up later on this month, as well as selective outreach to power and other segments. Okay, so that's sort of a quick flavor of the kind of things that we are doing from a marketing and outreach standpoint. So at this point, I think we, yeah. So I think if you want to learn more, please you can look at and drop an email to folks here. But at this point, we want to move into the panel session where we feature end users and suppliers and system integrators. To you can pepper them with questions and ask your questions about open process, okay, and how they think about it. And in terms of ecosystem development. Okay? All right.
Yeah, I have one question for Ed. Just on the certification, you broke it up in terms of its structure and how it's going to be phased. But what can you kind of describe the path that a supplier, a software supplier, hardware supplier would go through to do that process?
That is an excellent question, and I like that one. Actually, within OPAF, the groups have done a really tremendous job in terms of two documents that I want to refer to. One is the business guide from the BWG, and the other is the certification policy document that actually walks you through, basically, it's sort of like the holy grail of how we manage the certification program, from basically, soup to nuts all the way. But typically, when someone is going to want to submit a product for certification testing, they're going to get connected with our certification authority. And they're going to go out there, as I noted, there were several labs at, for security, OPC UA, and then, of course, eventually for Redfish. They will be able to deal directly with those labs, okay? Once all that testing is completed, as the example that I had showed, with respect to the OPC UA profiles and the security, they're going to provide our certification authority with a certificate that shows Ed went to that lab and fully met the requirements and passed the testing. And then the same thing will happen with ultimately Redfish, wherever that lab is that's been accredited and approved to conduct the testing. Once those documents are basically, and I'm covering this at a high level, have all been delivered to the certification authority, it goes through the process where ultimately we have a certification site that'll show the product has been certified, okay? And so there's evidence there that if someone were to publicly go to that external site, they're gonna see that product has met the requirements that we call out for certification. And the other thing to keep in mind is, you're right, you brought up the point that there are different releases, okay? And that's just based on the availability as we get the scripts fully verified and validated so that we can use them in the certification program. But there's quite a bit of information, quite frankly, in the certification policy document. So I would ask that you, when you have the time, to pull down that document and read through it, because we've tried to go through the process. If I had to submit a product for certification, what steps do I need to go through? What's required as part of that process? Did I cover? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I'd like to add to Ed's answer. It's fine. So, in addition to the certification policy, which is a detailed document that basically tells the step-by-step process or describe the step-by-step process, we have this activity of creating guides. And the idea of the guide is try to make it easier to read and to familiarize, in this case, for the suppliers that are going to certify the equipment, with the process of getting that done. And for the end users and system integrators out there that want to find out what products are available that meet certain profiles, once this process is done, what the idea will be for them to find basically in the registry of certified products where that information is going to be located, what type of suppliers, what type of profiles are being certified. So that's what I'm adding to this answer, as good as it was, is because it's part of what we are trying to address in this adoption guide. How do you, as an end user or system integrator, find out about what is available in the marketplace? And we point to this registry for that, right? Obviously, right now, the certification process, as Ed described, is starting, but once it's up and running, full-blown capacity, that's where you'll find information.
I just want to put a face to the process that Ed and Luis have just described. So when Ed refers to the certification authority, you're really talking about the open group. Susan Harper, please stand up. So Susan is the person that you will be interacting with, in this process that Harry asked about. Okay, so there's a face with the process.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Dan. Any other questions?
If you don't ask questions, we'll ask the questions to you.
I have a question or a request. I have a request.
You see?
No, Luis got me thinking about this. When you look at our documents, I mean, we've tried to go through many different scenarios in terms of what someone who's building product first to the spec, and secondly, wanting to get it tested. Okay, if you have the opportunity to actually pull down that document and read through it, and it isn't clear, please reach out to us. Okay, because that tells me that we may either we've missed a point or we need to provide some additional clarification. And that's even very true as an example of what Paul gave in terms of IOP. One of the benefits of an IOP is actually seeing, is the spec clear enough so that a vendor can go implement support for that function. If they're having problems with the interpretation, then obviously we need to go back. Or maybe that's not the way we thought it was going to work, and so we need to make a change. So that applies to any of our documents. But I know speaking with my certification hat on, we've done a lot of work with the help of many members trying to put that document together. And when I look at these documents, because I've worked in roughly 12 different consortia now, I've seen many different ways of approaching a problem, trying to address it. But I try to put myself in the shoes that I'm building the product. I want to go get it certified. Is the document clear enough for me in terms of guidance? Okay, so I would encourage you to do that. Pull the document down, read through it, and then if you've got questions, please reach out to us, and we'll work with Susan, who's our certification authority, to address that. Okay, that would be my ask of this audience.
So just to give some practicality to that, right? So you might ask yourself, how do you find those documents? So the Open Group has a library, and once the document is published, it is available in that library. You can download, you can review the documents. And this is true for the OPAF standard, the different parts that the Technology Working Group releases. Is true for the white paper, it's true for the certification policy and guide. So, and there is a formal process. This is not left to someone contacting Ed or Susan on the side. There's a formal process that allows you to either get clarification or request updates to the document if you find that something is misleading or wrong, right? So I think it's important to point to that structure is in place, and that we are actually in every release requesting feedback from the community that is going to consume the standard to get those comments in, to address those concerns, and try to give a proper answer, either by updating the document if that's necessary or providing a feedback to the requester.
So there's no more questions, or Harry has one.
Come on.
This is a question for Paul. No, I wanted to ask about if you could talk, I don't know if it's actually your question, but could you talk about the availability as these tools or scripts or whatever they are that for testing are developed, and specifically maybe about the communication or OPC UA, and if they relate to the IOP, maybe explain that. I'd just like to know a little more about that.
So I can talk a little bit about that. I guess I have to come back up on stage, is what I'm told.
No. They just want you in the camera.
I want me in the camera. All right. OPAS is a standard of standards, so they make use of the OPC-UA standard, and we have certification for OPC-UA available. People can run the tests and the test cases and the things we have. They're readily available from the Foundation's website, so you can already test all the OPC-UA portions readily. They're there. They're available. Anybody can run them. The scripts are there. We specify additional scripts for OPAS information models. That's part of the things we'll work on. And the testing is standard. It's nothing new. We exchanged, I'm a CA for OPC Foundation. Susan's the CA for the Open Group. We'll exchange certificates. So when you get tested for UA, we'll pass it on to them. So the interaction is clean and works well. And there is work defining test cases, defining scripts, but for the foundational side, the communications pieces are there for the most part. If you specify something brand new in one of the OPC-UA standards that just came out, it takes me a little while to get those out too, but it's good. I mean, we're working on things. That answer all your question? Okay.
Maybe something to add, I think it's important, points to the liaison relationship that we have, right? As Kurt mentioned, this is a standard of standards. And in order for the standard to be, workable, we need to be not only establishing formal liaisons with different organizations, as Mohan and others have mentioned, we also need to start working from certification authorities to certification authority in each of these standards. Well, obviously, Paul was describing the case of the OPC Foundation. We can talk about the work with regards to IEC 62443 for cybersecurity. And as we continue to develop the standard and add different or refer to other standards organizations, then we need to establish the formal liaisons and the collaboration so we can stay in sync and basically provide value for the community that is going to consume the standard down the road.
Okay. Sure.
A good example of that is to piggyback on that comment that Luis made is that we had looking at our specifications, we had the need to create some additional test purposes from which we need to also write test scripts. And because of our liaison with OPC-UA, and it was related to basically the work they were doing, we were able to hand off the test purpose and the test scripts, and then they went off and integrated that into the test tool and went off and tested it. So that's definitely one of the benefits when you have these relationships via a liaison, since we are a standard of standards, as Luis mentioned.
One thing I wanted to address, we talked about OPC-UA, but we didn't talk about the redfish portion that we're doing with ERDI. So they're creating test suites and stuff for the OPAF forum. Once we vetted it, like Ed had mentioned, and it's all been vetted by the forum and approved, we will then, those ones will be donated to the open group. They will be made publicly available for anybody to use. What we're trying to do is give the suppliers enough tools and the verification matrices, which we haven't really discussed at that point. Well, basically it's an open book test by the time you get to verification, because we know that's going to be your highest cost when a supplier goes through certification. It's not the certification part, it's the verification part. So we're trying to make that as easy and simple as possible for the suppliers. So if we can, we will make all the test tools available, either point up to OPC, their test tools, or if we have ones that are specifically built for OPAF, we will have them on the open group website for anybody to use at any time.
Hello. A question from an end user in Europe. I've been following this initiative for a couple of years, and I've been following OPC Foundation since '96 when they established. The modeling of automation system is quite important, I guess, and OPC Foundation is doing a great job in the OPC UA FX field exchange initiative, offline engineering, modeling, automation components, etc. The cooperation with those people in the OPAF team, would that be a good idea? Because as an end user, we become a little bit dizzy about all these modeling initiatives in MTP, NOAA, Asset Administration Shell, etc. So we should align, cooperate, and those kind of things. So, and you lack resources for doing a lot of these things. So what about, for instance, the FX initiative and run the show together with them?
I was going to say, if Don wants to answer that.
Kirk, you want to comment on it, or you want me to take it?
Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, Jan. So I mean, as evidence of the fact that we really are reaching out to align with these related initiatives, I mean, we incorporated PADIM directly into the OPAS spec, and we're actively working right now with the FX initiative to harmonize that. I know, I mean, Jeff Harding may be doing, at the ground level work on that. So these things are not happening in a vacuum. I mean, it may seem like we oscillate, one group does something and then it's a response from another, but we're clearly trying to work in alignment and in harmony with the related standards developments in the industry. Jeff, is there any need to elaborate? Stefan Hopping?
No, but I take the opportunity, being here as a president of the OPC Foundation, in 2019, when I have been 2020, when I've been last time here, Don and myself exactly came together and agreed we must avoid, in the interest of the industry, any double standardization. And nobody wants that. Not the organizations, and definitely not the users and product managers. I have been a product manager before. It's a nightmare to support multiple overlapping standards. And as a result of that, we made an agreement which has been signed a legal binding agreement by both organizations that the OPC Foundation is willing, and we do already open all internal documents which are important to know for the OPAFs, that you know what's going on inside the OPC Foundation, right? And this is what is in place. So whatever you want to know internally, what is the OPC Foundation working on, which we normally not publish before. We publish our specs when they are released. But with your organization, we have this in place. It's the first organization where we have this in place because of the importance of OPAS. And that's why also tomorrow other colleagues, Peter Lutz, the director of FLC, is coming on here. He will be here tomorrow to be available for all questions and answers. So whatever we can help, we do. And that's our cooperation. By the way, not only on technical level, we had a talk yesterday, the OPC Foundation also want to help the OPAS standard and the OPAF group to get more visibility in Europe. So the OPC Foundation has a huge booth at the ACHEMA, and we invited the OPAF group to be part of that group to show that we work closely together, right?
So a little follow-up to what Stefan said too. Since the FX specs, the UAFX specs are available, they've been a release candidate at this point. I've made presentations to the open group on them already, and we will continue pushing the synergy and the merging of those things. So far, they work well together, and we're in the process of integrating them. So,
How are we doing on time? How are we doing on time?
You're good. We're really good. We got plenty of time.
I see a question.
Half hour.
So I'm David DeBerry. I work for Exxon. We are members of OPAF. Can you all mentioned in the presentation both IOP and the end user engagement we did. Can you comment on what's planned for the future, where end users who are not part of the forum currently or not following it closely, when will they have their chance to, get information, participate where possible, and continue to contribute to this marketplace-wide activity?
Well, maybe I can start with one very, short-term activity, which is tomorrow morning. As a breakfast session, we're going to have an adoption workshop. It's going to be a short one. We would like to have more time, but it's really will collide with the rest of the agenda, so it's not going to happen as probably needed. But we can start with discussions about the scenarios in which end users and system integrators can start adopting the standard, and what they see the needs or the obstacles for that. So that's tomorrow morning. That's the first order. I know Mohan has mentioned a few of the other activities that we have planned, but
So just to add to that, so we also plan to engage selectively with different geographies, as I mentioned. So one may be targeting users in the Asia region, maybe Middle East, and then focus on China. But also, it is, we do encourage end users when we put these adoption workshops together or other forums to come in and learn more about OPAF and provide us feedback. And we do kind of plan to take some of this show on the road, so to speak. Okay, and whether it's a Hanover Messe or something, we'll have educational activities. At the same time, I think from providing user feedback, I think we welcome all end user feedback to provide to us, right? And that way we get that user stories, user requirements, that gets translated into user requirements. And I think that's the way we try to make sure that the end user voice is heard and that the standard that is developed is fit for purpose for end user needs, addressing end user needs.
Yeah, just a quick question. Eric DeVoy at BP. My question is, I guess based on the one talk, the Google search metrics, open process has definitely come a long way in the last few years. And you guys and all the conversation are doing a lot for more adoption, as I could tell. But I guess my question is, from your perspective, what's the biggest blocker or roadblock to take open automation further and faster?
That's a good question.
More participants would help, right? So, I mean, if you're in your company want to move faster, help us move faster. We always need help in, I think Ed would say test cases and test purposes if I forced him to say it, but you look at him nodding his head.
Yep.
So that's one thing. But there's just, that's probably the biggest thing in getting the spec codified right for certification is just doing those mechanics, and we're working through that now. I don't know if there's somebody else on that.
I like to, if we look back into the flow that we mentioned that drive the standard, right? So we start with the voices of the users. We want to make these user-centric in a way. So the narrative, the reasoning behind why you want to do this, the use cases in which you plan to adopt the standard, what will be beneficial to you as an end user, all of those, and obviously the requirements, all of that drives the standard, right? So, and, all of those steps from that narrative all the way to the standard, all the way to the certification requirements and the certification around those requirements, that's takes effort. So kind of to second to what Kirk was saying, the manpower is an important element there. So more participants is definitely going to help.
So can I add to that?
Please.
I'll be even more specific.
Yes.
The physical platform team, we've made progress, but it's been thanks to ExxonMobil standing up and putting up some money and hiring GTRI to work on it, and Intel coming in and bringing in their expertise and money to advance it.
Yep.
The rest of us need to stand up and participate.
Yep.
Right? It doesn't have to be a huge amount of money, but contribute. And of course, labor, we need editors on part 6.6, which deals with the 1131 and how it should be implemented within an OPAF system to maintain consistency. There's a lot of opportunity here. The system management work's advanced, but we've mostly talked about how to monitor. We haven't talked about the other things that need to go into system management, mostly because we're short of people. You want this to happen? Come help us. It's really simple.
And I can go.
The other thing is,
no, go ahead.
like Luis mentioned earlier, and I'll say it over and over again, if you want this, write it in your RFQs. Ask your vendors how they're participating, what they're doing to make this happen. Those are the things that need to happen. Volunteer, money, write it in your specs.
Yeah, so one thing I'll add is, you don't have to wait for the whole spec to be completely done. As you saw, right, with ExxonMobil, we're working off of 2.1 of the spec. It's almost good enough, to be able to do the work that needs to be done. So there's benefit to be had in earlier engagement. So I would encourage end users not to wait for everything to be dust to settle before you get engaged. I would encourage people to just get involved because there is benefit to be realized now.
Alex just gave a good example. So part 6 has got a number of subsections in there, okay? And one of the things that we in the CWG look for is, as a section is completed, hand it off to us so that we can work with the TWG members in terms of writing the test purpose and the test cases. That's where we can certainly use support. So if you want to go faster, based on the examples that Alex just shared with us, we need more people to get involved. Okay, and that's really across all the work groups, because there's quite a bit of work still to be done in the technical working group, in the enterprise architecture work group, in the business working group, and the certification work group. And then there are subcommittees or task groups within some of those work groups. So there's definitely plenty of opportunity. And I always look at my involvement in standards over the last 30 somewhat years is, if I want to be able to influence that standard and make sure it meets the requirements, I need to be involved. Okay, that's really the bottom line. So we certainly open to wanting anyone that wants to work with us to be able to get this thing going faster. I'm in another consortium as an example, and in a year and a half, because we've had people really just jump in, roll their sleeves up, we have rolled out the certification program. Okay, so it can be done, but we do need more membership.
I think we need to transition to a thing. Do we have a last question or anything? Otherwise, we have a panel discussion that we're going to transition over to. If not.
All right.
Okay.
So, thanks, Paul. So I think we'll transfer to the panel discussion and then invite our end user participants to come up on stage.
Did you go?
Okay. And Don and Harry's going to moderate. Thank you. I think we have 4 chairs. Okay. Do we need a couple more?
Bring up what to do. How do I convince someone?
Here they come. So here, you can use this. That'll work. Well, these easy questions? No. Thought we had. I thought we were over with the hard questions this morning. It's just the integrators. Okay, I would ask the panel to briefly introduce yourself, very briefly, just and what your company is and what your role is, both in your company and in the Open Process Automation Forum.
Okay. I'm Steve Smith. I'm with Eastman Chemical Company. I'm a project manager there. And as far as the OPAF is concerned, I've been primarily focused on the business working group and currently working on the adoption guide subcommittee right now.
So Mike Carroll, Georgia Pacific, responsible for innovation, transformation, strategic level across the company, been involved with OPAF, both on the business side and in the device side for a long time.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sharad Rashid from Malaysia. I think I'm from the other groups of the world to travel to more than 30 hours. So I've been involved with OPAF since 2016, where they have announced this open process, and I'm very excited about it. And now I'm part of the team. I'm the co-chair together with Ed, certification work group. So we are actually about to announce this test bed in Malaysia that we tie back to our training plan. So I'll talk more about it later. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to ask some questions, but I don't know if there's something you would like to say. The first question I would say is maybe talk a little bit about, in a little bit more depth about what's going on inside your companies with respect to open process automation. I heard stuff about things going on in Eastman, Steve. I've also heard stuff about GP and what's going on there. So I'd just like to know from your perspective what's gone on inside your companies, maybe give the audience a little bit of a deeper dive into what you have done internally with open process automation, besides participate in the forum, and if there are other activities you've done inside your own companies.
Yeah, I would say right now for Eastman, one of our primary focuses is on OPAF. I mean, honestly, we are really struggling right now. I mean, it seems like we're moving in the opposite direction when you look at our overall installed base and our platforms that we're trying to support from a lifecycle perspective. Unfortunately, we are far from a standardized situation, and with mergers and acquisitions, that just keeps going in the opposite direction for us. And so we're really struggling when we look at our landscape in terms of what we're going to do years down the road, just from a supportability, reliability standpoint. And so The open process automation effort here offers us a lot of hope, I'll say, in terms of the future. I mean, in terms of thinking about having systems that are truly interoperable, that are interchangeable from a component standpoint, that have portability in them from an application and configuration standpoint. And so we really came on board about 2.5 years ago with a lot of hope, honestly, that this would answer a lot of questions for us. We are also looking internally to improve our standards and to reduce our installed base and our platform. So we do have some efforts going there, but as you all well know, that is extremely difficult, extremely challenging from a time standpoint, from a resources standpoint, from a cost standpoint. And so we have really not moved very far in that direction on that journey, though we do have that as a vision. I mean, we've set a strategic path in place with a couple of suppliers, few key suppliers, and that's the direction we're going when we have greenfield opportunities or major replacements. But again, those are few and far between, and so it's not moving us very quickly toward a better horizon. So,
my turn.
Mike?
So, I think it's an interesting question. So, it's easy to say, go out, participate, build a test bed, right? And I think that's the easy answer. And the reason I think it's the easy answer is because that would be about the minimum. And if you do just that, what you haven't done is you haven't got ready to take advantage of what it offers. And the reason I say that is because in order to take advantage of what that offers, you have to understand strategically why you're doing this. And anybody hear me talk this morning? Anybody? All right. So we're in the midst of reconstructing ourselves to go create value at the rate that data is created in our company. Right? And that in order to do that, you can't just go say, I'm going to put in a different type of DCS system. That is a holistic strategy that says that everything that is the connected ecosystem of technologies and interoperability that connects my customer to my entire supply chain has to interoperate with data all the way through, right? So if you don't set everything else up for that strategically at the same time that you're doing OPAF, right? Why would you just go do OPAF by itself? Right, so you got to do all this stuff in concert to have a degree of interoperability. So we're out building the platform that says that the operations organization no longer has to have permission from the IT organization to go create value of the digital representation of the very physical asset it's in charge of. It goes and stands up an application in the architecture, and it creates value immediately. And guess what it talks to? Everything. That's the kind of power we're talking about, which means now the edge is connected all the way down to the DCS level, which means your customer's also connected to the entire supply chain in a transparent way that gives you the kind of agility that only the tech companies have. That's an exponential company. You create value differently when you're that kind of company. Who's second place to Facebook? Does anybody know who's second place to Facebook? So when you're that kind of company, an exponential company, the rules are different in the way you create value. So it's a different kind of game. And so if you don't strategically understand what you're doing, and that OPAF is a piece of this, then you just don't get it. Boy, they're quiet now, right? And so that's why we're all doing this. Exxon opened the door, and we all got to go step through it together, right? But it's a part of the equation that says that I'm going to go become an exponential manufacturing company. That answer your question?
That's an answer for sure. That's a hard act to follow. But Sharul, you're up next. So let me just ask the question. I know you have participated in some other ARC forums that I was not present at, so I may be a little out of date. But your efforts began, I think, in a people development facility that you have. So you have a significant facility that you use to develop all the people that join and are part of Petronas. So could you talk about what's gone on there with your development and why you're using or your test bed, your OPAS test bed there?
Right. Okay. Thanks, Harry. As I mentioned, when this open process automation has been introduced back in 2016, it was something like I've been looking for. DCS of the future, that's a topic that my management actually pushed to me. What is the DCS of the future? What is the safety system of the future? So this standard-based, open, interoperable, secured by design, it is the one that I've been looking for. That is why I really an advocacy of this open process. But the issue right now is that there's always this an issue of we have been used to a system integrator. We have been used to the proprietary. Any fault problem in the system, we can pinpoint to that particular vendor. But when it comes to this open system, I can tell you, like for example, the head is brand A, the body is brand B, the legs is brand C. So if something happened to that system, who are we to blame? So the movement to open process is very uncomfortable for those who are not prepared themselves. That is why I'm here to prepare my workforce, Petronas. Petronas is about 50,000 staff. And we have a lot of asset platforms. We have asset on the on-site, petrochemical, we have refineries, we have retails. And these are all populated by proprietary system. But are we going to leave this proprietary forever? Knowing the IT, communication, telecommunication are all has been open. And what is not open is the OT side. So I look at myself by 2025, for example, when the system is available. My plan is this: I'm going to open the system, open the bid to either proprietary system who can bid, or the OPAS who can bid. And by that time, we can see the attractiveness of because Petronas is looking at the technical. As long as technical conformance, technical specification is very clear, then we go for the commercial. So we go for the lowest bid. So I assume by 2025, the system is available. I'm going to open bid. Proprietary also can bid. This open process also can bid. And hopefully OPAS is attractive and it's cheaper than the proprietary. So by that time, if I did not move I did not make the move now, I'm afraid that by 2025, when the system is ready, my management will ask, Sharul, do the risk assessment, because to adopt a new system, totally brand new system, a new concept, there's a risk associated with that, because we can't afford to you rip your old system, you replace with a new system, either legacy system, proprietary system, or open system. That new system of OPAS is something new, and we didn't even involve day one. They asked me to get consultant to study the risk. Wow. Then why I'm going to get a consultant if I have a choice now to get involved, to have the test bed, so that my staff is able to play around with the system and then start asking questions. Because there's a lot of IT terminology. For example, yesterday Dave talked about Kubernetes. What the hell is this term? System orchestration, what is this? OT guy doesn't even understand what is orchestration, Kubernetes. We know about visualization, we know sometimes to that extent, but not a lot of IT technology which is foreign to us. So we really have to play with system. That's why test bed has been approved by management. I managed to convince my management that we need to have the test bed, and to make it a little bit low risk, we connect it to the training plan. We have training plan. We have offshore training plan. We built the offshore platform on land for training purposes, and these are to be connected to OPAS. so that we can have the system running as real. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sharul. I'm at a point of my own, excuse me for interjecting, but one thing you said really cued off. I was 3 weeks ago, I think, I was at the major Linux Foundation, Cloud Native Foundation conference on cloud computing, and they had a big job board there, and it was a huge job board. And I looked all over that job board, and I did not see a single person saying, I'm looking for a new job. I saw many companies saying, oh, we want people with experience in cloud native computing, experience in Kubernetes or service meshes or other kinds of new technology. So it's a problem in the IT space now with companies. So my personal opinion is that in the manufacturing and automation space, we're really going to have to keep those kind of technologies under the hood and manage them, or find a way to manage them effectively. And it's also a problem in IT. It's going to be even worse, I think, in our case, or more difficult. My personal opinion. Are there questions from the floor? I don't want to keep asking questions up here. So if there's some questions people would like, I see one over here. If somebody could get a microphone to Dave. He's over there. Stand up here. He's easy to see when he stands up.
Thank you. So I have a question. David DeBerry, ExxonMobil. Obviously, we go to conferences, sit on panels. I meet people who work for companies who are part of our collaboration partners, and they don't know we're collaboration partners. I meet people in companies who are members of the forum who don't know what OPA means. So my question to you all is, what are you doing, or what are your plans to make the rest of your workforce aware of this enabling architecture that will free them from the paradigms that they live in today, and be able to answer and address the challenges that our businesses have, and go catch up with that data that's being released every day, as you said, Mike. But and how do we spread this knowledge out across the organization with new people and the new brains and the new innovators? That's really my question.
That is a really good question, because you heard me talk about today that if you just go to the plant level, the crisis they all live in is what I said it was. Am I going to have enough people to run my plant today? Enough raw material to run it. If it breaks down, I have enough parts to fix it. And without a doubt, if we don't do a better job of helping people understand the context of the longer term strategy of survival in this change, as I just described it, right, then we will lose. We will lose the reason why. And it's so important that we get them connected to that, so that we don't lose that strategy and we become like Robert E. Lee when he had a great strategy when he invaded the North, and he found the North at Gettysburg, and he abandoned that strategy, and he lost the battle, and he was never able to take the initiative again. And so he was always on the defensive, and we know the outcome of that. And so we don't want to fall into that trap. And so I think we all need to do a better job of communicating the why. And so internally in my company, it's a crusade effort of helping people understand why we're a part of this. And it's really about the opportunity to create value at the rate that data grows. And because that's what makes you successful and competitive in the future. That's the comparative advantage that you're going to have. And it's easy to remember, right? That unless you can stop prioritizing things and start prioritizing scale and create value at the rate of data grows, and all your stuff's interoperable, which includes your DCS system. It has to go all the way down to the process. You can't stop before you get to the process. And the DCS system is key to that. then none of this works. Does that answer your question? We have to help people understand why. I wish I'd just told this story 6 or 8 years ago when we first started talking about all this. I think we'd have been better off.
Other comments?
I'll just say that, to your point, Dave, we've struggled internally too to adequately convey the message I think that we feel like we're facing right now and the need for this. I mean, obviously our management at some level has been very supportive, and we hired, we came on board as members of the OPAF 2.5 years ago. And again, they've continued to be supportive of us continuing that relationship. But with that said, we don't have a large number of folks within our organization, even though we have 15,000 employees that are actively participating in OPAF. I mean, it's myself and 1 or 2 others. And so, again, it's back to challenges with workload and other competing priorities and those sort of things, unfortunately. But I'll say also that we're just struggling internally to adequately convey messages and needs around this whole automation space in terms of just the horizon that I described, that I think is so really scary and challenging for us to really understand, though we seem to be getting by today, what does it look like in 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years, and where are we truly going to be at that point, and what do we need to be doing about that today? And so we've had a difficult time to really adequately, I'll say, communicate that message, to leadership to fully articulate, I think, the seriousness of this issue and matter and the importance of this type of effort.
Okay, from Petronas, as I mentioned, I'm preparing my workforce. Okay, I am from instrument control. I am the group technical authority, the highest in Petronas in terms of instrument control. And under me, we have this staff with supporting the DCS, the specialist to support the DCS. And what happened is that we have this what they call institutionalized capability building. Okay, very hard to twist that tongue. We established the institutionalized capability building. So part of the capability is actually to build the test bed, and I'm happy to announce that we have actually awarded to Yokogawa as our partner to build the test bed. Hopefully by Q1 2023, the test bed is ready. And inside the package that we awarded to Yokogawa is basically to conduct training. Conduct trainings about this open system, and this is part of the preparation of our workforce. And Petronas is actually very concerned in skill set. Competency is very key to us. And we value the people assets, we value the knowledge. And now that with open process automation, it's something very, very new. And the fact that we cannot blame anybody when the thing goes wrong. We have to build up the competency, capability, understand very well what is this system is all about. In contrast, if, for example, in the past, the proprietary, we depended totally on the vendor. The vendor do the function block. We don't even understand what this function block is doing because the vendor is the proprietary. And when we ask them for detail, this is proprietary. We cannot go deep in the proprietary. But when it comes to open process, everything's open. We have to understand the function block. We have to understand how the flow goes in, goes out. Because, as I mentioned, nobody to blame. The system integrator is there, but eventually the owner has to take responsibility. It is a big steps. It may be a big risk, but when I prepare my workforce, the risk will become very low, and the management will buy it. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have my watch with me, but I think we have like 1 or 2 minutes left. 4? Okay, so we have time for probably one more question, as long as you don't ask Mike. So, no, I'm serious. We have time for one more question. So does someone else have a question?
There's one on the wall.
I see one over here.
Hi, Jarrett Lawrence, ExxonMobil. I guess my question's relatively simple, but probably a complex answer. How do we get the mindset changed in our industry to say what's broken and why are we trying to fix it? So there's a lot of that, I think, in our industry of how we've continued to do things for the past 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. How do we change and shift the mindsets to say, we're changing, but that doesn't mean we're leaving you behind. We're changing for a better future and a more, innovative future, if you will. So how do we change that culture and that mindset through this actual OPAF kind of environment?
Go ahead, Sharul.
Thank
You're
you.
ready.
That's my favorite subject. When I was with OPI, Operation Performance Improvement Team, we engaged consultant, which is McKinsey. And they have introduced this influence model. The first quadrant is basically foster understanding with conviction. The second is basically you have to be a role model. And the third one is basically you have to provide the tools, the equipment, the trainings. And the last one is you penalize them or reward them if they are able to follow what you want them to do. So with that influence model, which is we can Google is there, understand what is OPAF, then after that you role model. So that's why I'm role model. I'm actually building it. I get somebody to build for us, and then provide training. That's where the training is. And then the last one is the rewards. So we anticipate some reward from that. Whatever mission, vision that you want somebody else to follow you, that is the kind of quadrant that you should follow. Thank you.
I just want to say real quick too, I certainly agree with your question and your ask and our need for better convincing and communication and such about this need. But I'll say as an end user, I have been very pleased and surprised since we've become part of OPAF of the number of suppliers that are not only involved in this effort, but actively engaged and involved and supportive. In fact, really what I've seen from the internal workings is it's really opposite from exactly what you'd think. You'd expect that this would be purely end users making this plea and trying to drag in and beg suppliers to participate. It's really been the opposite. The forum oftentimes is dominated by suppliers, and we're in need of more end users to participate. And so while not every supplier is at the table, I agree, and so there's still importance of that messaging that needs to be made. There are a number of suppliers, and a number of the suppliers that were in that list of participating companies are actively engaged and committed in participating in this effort. So I'll just say as an end user, again, we're not there yet, but it has been very encouraging to see the number of suppliers that are actively participating and desiring success in this effort.
Mike, we do have time for a comment from you. I didn't mean to be flip.
You sure about that? So I think to your answer of your question is that you need to invite people to make up their own mind. Typically, we don't tell people anything, and even when you give them more data about something that they agree with but didn't want to do to start with, they dig in harder. So we usually use a technique called motivational interviewing, which invites them to discuss with you what they're uncomfortable about and that truth that they don't like. And then when you find out where they're uncomfortable, you discover why they're uncomfortable about that. Let them know that they're in control of that, and help them decide what they can go do about it. And it's really that simple. And that way they make up their own mind as to what their own optionality is regarding that. And eventually they end up deciding why and how they want to go solve the problem with them being in charge of it and without you being the solution.
I'll say too real quick that we've also said that, as end users, we need to really be asking this of our suppliers and expressing this as an interest. I mean, when we're asking for specifications, when we're asking for proposals, we really need to be asking them where they stand on this issue and what they can provide us consistent with this path. And so I think that's stands for us as end users to really have a stronger voice and request and make this desire, known.
Okay, well, we are completely out of time, so I want to thank the panel and the open group for this session. So please show your appreciation.